Well, hello there, everybody. Steve the Amateur Historian, out in the forest, as you can clearly tell. I got a little treat for you tonight because now, forthcoming for you, is episode 4 in my series where I review bad 1970s movies. So tonight I actually have a couple of films that, as opposed to probably a lot of the stuff I'm going to watch, are actually two films I enjoy. The first one that we are going to review is the 1975 film Mitchell. And after that we're going to review the 1978 film The Squeeze. Okay, I don't know what is going on with the hair, but that is voluminous. I look gorgeous. Anyway, 1975 film Mitchell. That's where we're starting. How do you like this case? I feel like this is like what very amateurish thumbnails that people create for their YouTube look like. You got kind of a background of the city, then you just got things, as much stuff cropped in there as you can. And yeah, this is a Miracle Pictures release. You know, low budget DVD, but I like it that way. It's got like the very simple disc inside. I wonder if this is one of those discs that looks like, no, it looks solid. Because I know sometimes you'll buy a movie like this and it'll still be like a DVD that got burned off of some other copy somewhere. But anyway, the 1975 film Mitchell. This film has, as far as my series has gone so far, this film has the lowest IMDB score of any film I've covered. There are some pretty bad movies I've covered or I'm going to cover that are like, you know, 4s and maybe high 3s. I know The Swap was 3.4. This baby has a 2.6 on IMDb, which really threw me because you want to know something? I enjoy this movie. I've watched it a couple of times. I will not deny that it's very choppy. The pacing is all over the place. The film quality is very low because it was a low budget film. I'm actually amazed they got who they got. You know, there's some actors in here that I feel like I probably should know, but don't. But the film stars Joe Don Baker in a character that was very much him during the 70s. He's this really just dirty, nasty, scummy cop. And Martin Balsam is in it, the iconic Martin Balsam, who was the jury foreman in 12 Angry Men. He was the investigator guy in Psycho. Like, this guy's been in a lot of stuff, and even he's in this film. Although a lot of actors from that time, like him, they ended up doing really low-budget stuff in the 70s, as I've mentioned numerous times in this series. So, it's actually got a pretty good cast for being really low budget, and for all its issues, I thoroughly enjoy this film. And maybe because it's so quick and choppy, I think that keeps your attention where anything else might lose you. So, Mitchell is a pretty, I mean, after saying I really enjoy it, it's a pretty straightforward cop drama, but it is entertaining that you don't necessarily know how things are necessarily going to end, because when the film starts, Mitchell, which is Joe Don Baker, plays a guy named Mitchell, and again, he's this, you know, gritty, nasty, beer-guzzling, porn-reading cop who takes an interest in a particular criminal, you know, who's got the really nice house and all this stuff. He's involved in a lot of stuff. But he ends up getting directed to investigate Martin Balsam's character, who's kind of this older guy who, if you don't know much about him, he might seem to just be a normal wealthy dude. Of course, most normal wealthy dudes have something extra going on. And he does too. He's involved in the shipment of drugs, which Mitchell has to gradually discover. So there's kind of these two different criminals that he's looking into at the start. And while he's supposed to be focusing on Martin Balsam's character, who he doesn't really put a lot of credence in as someone worth his time, he's more focusing on this other guy and kind of looking into him. And of course, you know, things progress from there. You know, Mitchell is going to do things his way. He's going to follow his own methods regardless of what his higher-ups want him to do. That's what you do in a film like this. And so the usual things ensue. Mitchell does what he wants to do. He meets restrictions along the way, either from the brass or anything you might encounter. He encounters, life and death situations. He has to deal with a lot of scummy figures, of which he kind of fits in with. And, it all develops towards a, dynamic conclusion. I just, I acknowledge its faults. Some of the editing is very choppy, and again, it seems to move just very quickly from one thing to another. There's only one real moment in the film where things aren't kind of moving pretty fast, and that is when he has a prostitute sent to him by, one of the guys he's supposed to be investigating almost as a bribe, and they kind of spend time together, and you kind of get to see how, she's there with him, she's being paid off, she's, pretty nice and warm to the guy. For some reason, she's really into him, and Mitchell just treats her like crap because he treats everyone like crap. That's kind of the point. And I know a lot of people, some of the reviews I wrote, because again, this is one of those movies where most of the reviews you see on IMDb, someone's either giving it a 1 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. But it is kind of split between how people perceive this film, and yet it has a 2.6 on IMDb. And it really confused me. And I swear, the first time I looked Mitchell up, it had a pretty bad score, but it was like a 3 point something, and it's just nosedive down to a 2.6, and I'm like, okay, this film is by no means perfect. It has its flaws. It's very low budget. It's not perfect. There are predictable elements to this film, but this film isn't any more predictable than a lot of crime dramas that were coming out of the 70s. And it's kind of achieved a little bit of cult status, but I'm like, so why is this one? I've seen some pretty bad films. I watched Ransom Money, which was horrible, and it has like a 4.5 or something like that on IMDb. How is that 2 full points better than Mitchell, which this is a substantially better, more entertaining, much more better acted film? And I didn't know about this, but what I found out is a lot of people discovered the film Mitchell because it was a film that was featured on the show Mystery Science Theater 3000, which, if you've never heard of, I don't really know where you've been, but Mystery Science Theater 3000, I watched it a lot when I was a teenager, and then, I turned 16. Not trying to knock people that watch Mystery Science Theater 3000. It doesn't do anything for me anymore. But essentially, it's this guy, and he has these two kind of oddball robotic colleagues, and they sit and they watch what are, often, they essentially watch the kind of stuff I'm watching, but their show is usually, a lot of the subject matter, they, at least from my memory of watching it, maybe they ran the tables, but whenever I watched it, they were always watching a really bad sci-fi film or like a really bad horror film. So Mitchell was a little bit outside of those parameters in that it's like a 70s cop drama. But, because it was featured on there, it was, I honestly think the reason it has the bad score that it does is because because Mystery Science Theater 3000 is one of these things where they have just kind of a wildly devoted fan base. And I think a lot of people, I could see a lot of people watching that episode and then going and finding Mitchell on IMDb and giving it like a 1. Like, that movie sucked. And it's really unfair because the version of the film they watched was heavily edited. Like, literally, like, a third of the movie was cropped out, as I understand it. The main bad guy, besides Martin Balsam, that Mitchell is supposed to be looking into, he apparently is barely even in the film, even though he's like a prominent character. So a massive chunk of the film is cropped out. It was edited down to fit into, their parameters. So it's not even a complete version of the film. And, essentially the reason it has the horrible score that it has, because again, I'm thoroughly convinced with this, it's very very rare. Like, you can have some bombs in terms of film, but they're still going to have like a, 4 or a 5 something on IMDb. This has a 2.6. Don't tell me there isn't nonsense afoot. So I honestly think the reason Mitchell has the horrid score that it does on IMDb is purely due to, essentially, I don't know what the term would be, but, it's almost 4chan like behavior. Let's all go in and spam this thing and I'll give it a 1 and give it this horrible score when all is said and done. So this film's score on IMDb, I think, thoroughly suffers because of that. And transitioning from IMDb to its Rotten Tomatoes score. I believe I said in my last video that there's a lot of these films that I looked into that most of them there's only an audience score because they're so obscure. But a lot of films have a 29 score on Rotten Tomatoes. Mitchell is another film that has a 29 audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm surprised it's not lower. Maybe the Mystery Science Theater 3000 crowd just doesn't go to Rotten Tomatoes as much as IMDb. I don't know. So it's certainly not a 2.6 film. And it's just, I see, first of all, a lot of people are bothered when the main character, who's supposed to at least to some degree be a protagonist, even if maybe they're like an anti-hero or something like that, they want there to always be like very redeeming qualities to the main character. There's really not any redeeming character or qualities to Joe Don Baker's Mitchell character. Even the last scene of the film, he again, spoilers, letting you know, last scene of the film before we go to the credits is he comes home and the woman, the prostitute he was seeing, is there waiting for him. And as he sits down with her, he smells weed. And so he grabs her and is like, all right, let's go.
Oh, yeah. All right. Let's get your coat.
And then that's the end of the film, is like he's going to drag her off to the police station to have her busted for marijuana possession. So this is the protagonist of the film. And you know it's going to be an awesome film when there is a song written specifically for the film, which is pretty rare nowadays. Like, you know, the James Bond films always have like a song done specifically at the beginning, but that was a very prominent 70s thing. And they were often these kind of twangy country type songs. The No Mercy Man that I reviewed, it had a song like that. And there's a song, a kind of twangy country song that's called Mitchell. It doesn't say on here who did it, but yeah, I looked it up on when I was looking at Wikipedia. They said it was like a country music guy that did the song, and it's one of these songs like, Mitchell, you're such a bad cop. I don't remember what the lyrics were, but yeah, it's one of those kind of things. That's when you know it's going to be a really good film. And there's, you know, for any predictability, you know, at least Mitchell is a shift. You know, he certainly wasn't the first character to be like this. You know, obviously Dirty Harry came out 4 years earlier. By this point, the second Dirty Harry movie had already been done. And, you know, Clint Eastwood kind of personified the police officer who's going to do what he has to do regardless of, you know, you know, whatever sacrifices or whatever consequences may be awaiting. He's going to do what it takes to get the bad guy and hopefully save the good guy. But Mitchell is even more depraved than Clint Eastwood. It's not because he's racist. It's not because he's, you know, into porn or he's a drinker or he breaks the law. But Mitchell is almost, and this is kind of eerie, especially, I mean, I'm living in Portland right now. We all know what's been going on in Portland in terms of protester to police officer relations. It's not good. So, you know, it's interesting that the character of Mitchell is very much, you know, there's an element of his character where you think one of the main reasons that he is a officer of the law is so that he has a certain level of authority and he can kind of do what he wants. He can, you know, if he feels like he wants to be violent towards someone, he can go out there and find any random criminal or maybe innocent person he wants and bust him up. There's one sequence where, granted, this guy was coming, I think, to kill him, and he slams the guy's hand in a car door, which, no. Especially old cars, solid metal, slamming fingers in a door, I'm out at that. That's the one scene of one moment in the film where I'm like, no, just can't. So his Mitchell character is very, you know, props. And I know some of the reviews I read from people who have watched the film, they give the same props that he's not just a run-of-the-mill kind of like cop with a chip on his shoulder or a cop who's not perfect or a cop who's going to, you know, go a little bit outside the law. This guy's just straight up corrupt, and yet you kind of got his back at the same time because he's still going after the bad guys, I guess. And there are you know, there's some great stuff in this film. There's a scene where, you know, he's being chased by guys on like they're not quite dune buggies, but they're like those little cars that you kind of race on the sand. And there's a chase scene with those. It's a very entertaining sequence. Like there's a lot of entertaining moments, and there's a lot of these little gems throughout the film that I just think are great.
My mother doesn't like you.
Well, I don't like your mother.
Why not?
Why not?
No, why not?
No, why not?
Why are you repeating what I say?
Why are you repeating what I say?
I'm not.
Well, I'm not.
You are.
Piss off.
What?
What?
What did he say?
What'd you say?
Did you say something?
You say something?
You said piss off.
You're lying through your teeth.
You're lying through your teeth.
Piss off, huh?
Piss off.
Piss off, kid!
Well, what I want to know is... Luffy's called, man. You're a goddamn awful butler.
I am not a goddamn awful
You are
butler.
a goddamn awful butler.
I am not.
I say you're a goddamn awful butler. The coffee's cold.
Well, I think I gotta go.
So bust me. You're a policeman, and that's crass. Oh, come on. Come on. You sure know how to bring a girl down. He just lays me, then busts me.
Mitchell. This is the description of the movie on the back of the DVD. Mitchell is a hard-nosed loner cop with an affinity for adult movies and beer. And, you know, the occasional prostitute. His latest assignment has him involved in harrowing car chases, shootings, and carousing with a beautiful blonde. Which is a little manipulative. He's not really carousing with her. He just kind of sees her a couple times. All this in the name of justice for the good guys, which is also a little bit deceptive. I don't really know how much Mitchell really cares about scoring one for the good guys. I definitely think as a cop, he thinks whatever he does, he's part of the good side, so he's just taking out the bad guys bit by bit. But in the end, you know, for what it lacks great production quality because it was a low-budget 70s film, but the acting is good. You know, again, you have Joe Don Baker, you have Martin Balsam, but even, you know, the side characters, the acting is not, especially for a 70s movie. You know, in certain cases, certain examples, you can't really compare 70s film acting to 2010s film acting because there's so many differences. It's like trying to compare a 70s film to a 30s film. You know, it was a different time, different types of films being made. There was a different, you know, the social climate, the political climate, everything was different. But for the low-budget film it was, they got a pretty good cast, and this is a very Joe Don Baker type of film. Most of the films he did, particularly in the 70s, he was going out and kicking somebody's ass. But yeah, again, I think the film has a few pacing issues. You know, sometimes it's a little bit too much, jump to this, to this, to this, to this, to back to that. And then suddenly you have this moment where he's with this prostitute, and that scene, that period is like, seems like it lasts forever, even though I think it's, you know, not that long. The film's only like, what, 97 minutes? Yeah, 97 minutes. And, you know, the editing, again, when you got pacing issues, the editing is a little choppy at times. The climactic end scene, which I'm not going to spoil for you because I feel like this is a film, I guess I did explain what the last scene is, but that very last scene in the film doesn't really have much to do with everything else. It's just his interaction with this prostitute who has a little thing for him. But even like the big climactic ending scene it's a little rough. it definitely could have been cut together better. And, who knows, how many takes they were taking, if they, So, that's the thing is, like, you got to be prepared, you got to be ready, you got to have all your shots prepared, because when you go into the editing room, if you want it to look a certain way, you have to have enough shots, enough different angles, enough this and that to make sure that you can make that happen. And if you can't, you have to kind of fudge things together. And I feel like, because this was a low-budget film, there are moments like that where you can tell, like, something kind of had to be fudged because they probably didn't get quite enough shots. And again, that's where you end up stuck with this kind of choppiness at times. But aside from that, this is a perfectly, if not a great film, if not a great cop drama, if not a great 70s film, this is a very entertaining film. This will keep your attention. Because when there's not action going on, when there's not shooting and car chases and whatnot, you kind of get to see Joe Don Baker just acting like a degenerate slob, and even that's kind of entertaining. So, I wanted to see this movie, even though, and I was kind of bummed when I saw the ratings were so bad. Again, I think that's from kind of a little bit misrepresentative of what it would be if it was just genuine people watching film that were rating it. Because, again, it has a 2.6, and yet almost half the people that reviewed it on IMDb gave it like a 7 to 10 score out of 10. But, so I was a little bit, when I saw that it had such a bad score on IMDb, I thought, oh man, this is going to be terrible, and like, it sounds interesting. It's got Joe Don Baker beating criminal ass. It's a 70s film. It's a 70s crime drama. I love that stuff. So I was a little like, I was like, well, I still should watch it. And I sat down, and I kind of, I've seen it more than once. This was the first time I saw it. And by the time it was done, I was like, that was pretty damn entertaining. So yeah, you go out and give it a watch. Again, so it has a BS 2.6 on IMDb. And again, I'm rating this just based, I'm not going by all the stipulations you'd go through when trying to give something a genuine IMDb score. When I give my IMDb score, I'm giving that very much on just the overall general entertainment appeal, how much I enjoyed the film. Because the idea is that these films are supposed to be bad, so you shouldn't be really basing too much around really the great quality that the film is going to have. So that being said, I'd give this movie about a 6.8. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe just a hair under a 7. 6.8. Definitely better than what it got otherwise. It's, if you like 70s crime dramas, even though this one isn't The French Connection, this one isn't Dog Day Afternoon, or Taxi Driver, but it'll give you, I think, if you just love the elements of those types of films, it'll give you what you want. And that's my review of this film. I mean, of all the films I've watched, this is definitely the one I enjoy the most. And that being said, this next one's obviously not going to get as good of a review because it's not Mitchell, but they can't all be perfect, especially when they're supposed to all be bad. Let's go to the next video. Now, of course, having just said that, this next movie is actually another movie that I was very pleasantly surprised by. And it's another one of these films. Again, I love finding these little diamonds in the rough that I know are probably usually going to be pretty bad films. And some of them I bought in, big collections, but some of them I find at hawk shops, like, oh, here's a 50-cent DVD. And I'm like, oh, what's this? Oh, this is like a 70s crime drama of some kind. And that was the case with this next film. And that one is the 1978 film The Squeeze, which I believe it was also known as The Ripoff. That was another title it went under. And it's very important to understand what movie I'm talking about. This is the 1978, it says right there, the 1978 film The Squeeze. Because there was a 1977 film called The Squeeze, which was a Stacy Keach crime drama, kidnapping, ransom type film. This is a different film. And again, yeah, I didn't get this at CD Game Exchange, but there's an old CD Game Exchange sticker there. But I actually think I got this at like the A1 Hawk Shop in Portland, which not recently, obviously, but I'll go in there because they want to sell you like 10 DVDs for $20, and I like collecting my DVDs. But this film is another one of those 70s heist films. It stars Lee Van Cleef, a much older Lee Van Cleef. Lee Van Cleef was, his career goes back, I think, to the 40s. And he did some film noirs, but he was mostly known for being in westerns. And also Karen Black, wild, crazy-eyed Karen Black, who pops up in a lot of these types of movies that I buy. I know she was in Born to Win, which is another film I'm gonna review. So she was either in like she was in a Hitchcock film, you know, and she was in one of the airport movies. So she was in some big stuff, but then she did, you know, kind of lower end stuff like this. And one of the reasons that I think Lee Van Cleef, who again did mostly westerns, was scored for a film like The Squeeze is it was directed by Antonio Margheriti. If you've seen Inglorious Basterds, you've heard that name before.
Margheriti.
Because Antonio Margheriti was prominently known for doing like spaghetti westerns, and he was very well appreciated and respected by Quentin Tarantino, and that was probably part of the reason for the reference in Inglorious Basterds. And so this film was done later, because again, this guy was doing film, you know, back in the 50s and 60s, and this is a late 70s film. So a little bit outside of his norm, but he had worked with Lee Van Cleef on westerns before. And so the description given to the outline of this film, this is, of course, they're going to, you know, blow things up a little bit and make it seem like it's the greatest film ever done, because it's, you know, another one of these kind of low-end production companies. This might even be a DigiView. I want to see. I actually want to see. Miracle Pictures. So this is great. These are two films where the copy I have are from Miracle Pictures, because the copy of Mitchell I have is also them. So their description of this film: this is a classic crime drama about a safecracker, Lee Van Cleef, coming out of retirement to pull off one last caper. How many films do we know of that is the main storyline? The Germans behind the theft are planning to steal $1 million, but unbeknownst to the safecracker, they are planning to kill him afterwards. So they're going to bring on Lee Van Cleef, do the job, and then kill him. Pretty standard amongst, you know, the grittiest of criminals. When he learns of their intent, he begins plotting his revenge. So that's the description. So again, well-covered ground, in all fairness. The classic, you know, a guy who's been there, done that, who's now getting older and is like, I'm done doing all that stuff. And then someone says, no, one last job, man. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. Oh, all right, I'll do it. And so the film is, you know, again, a lot of these heist films, it all builds up to the heist, and that's kind of the big climax, and whether they're successful or not. A lot of times they end up not being successful. It's kind of a later kind of noir-ish. It was very, very much kind of a film noir thing, where the guy comes out and he's going to do one last job, and then the kind of black twist is that at the end they end up not pulling it off. They either end up getting busted or they end up dead or whatever. But usually you're building up to the heist. That's the end of the film, is getting to the heist. But in this film, the heist is done in the middle of the film. So you have the first part of the film, first half of the film, which is focused on getting Lee Van Cleef involved and going and pulling off the heist. The second half of the film is, you know, him realizing his life is in danger and that they're planning on killing him, and then him having to, as the description says, protect himself and exact his own revenge. So that you've got two stories coming together. It's not just about the heist, it's about the heist and what occurs afterward. So it is somewhat distinct in that vein, but like a lot of the films I've watched, you know, this is a fairly low-budget picture, but it had a fairly well-known director doing it, and you had a few fairly well-known actors in it, so it wasn't just, you know, bottom of the barrel. No, you know, everybody who was in it was a no-name actor. The guy who directed it, they directed this and like one other crap film, and that was pretty much it before they just vanished off the face of the earth. You've got Antonio Margheriti directing this stuff. That's the last time I'm going to do that joke.
Margheriti.
And it's, and Lee Van Cleef is a very intriguing actor, and he had these eyes that kind of, he's always kind of leering and staring through you, which made him good in those like spaghetti westerns. But it made him good. He played a good bad guy because he always had kind of a sinister look about him. The first movie I ever saw him in was Kansas City Confidential, which was a noir that he was in. And yeah, the whole movie he's like picking his teeth with a toothpick, and he's kind of looking around at people and kind of sleek, and he calls the main guy Palsy. What are you gonna do now, Palsy? And so he's solid. The acting in this film is not too bad, at least from the actors that we know. And I was actually surprised at how much action there was in this film, because another film that's kind of similar to this is a 1972 film called The Master Touch, which I'll be addressing in this series. And that's another movie where it stars Kirk Douglas, and he's getting older, and he's done doing his heist work, and he decides to pull off one last heist. And I'll get more into that film when I review it, but that film it trudges along. There's a lot of drag in that film. It's like 100 minutes or whatever, 110 minutes, and you're like, they could have done this movie in 70, But this film, Squeeze, kind of avoids that because it keeps going. So sometimes it goes a little too fast, a little bit too back and forth, but I love, this is a film that is like, it's gritty, low quality because it's a low budget film, but it takes advantage of that. Like the surroundings around are gritty. Everything you see in the film is supposed to be gritty, so it almost fits into this kind of low quality film. So you're almost not bothered by the fact that the production value isn't that great even for a 70s movie. At least that's how I felt watching it. And here's the thing, I'm not a big heist movie fan because they all fall too much into it's the same thing. It's people getting together to do kind of the same thing, so you kind of know where it's going to go. But The Squeeze is probably one of the more, and maybe it's because the heist doesn't, the whole film isn't about getting to the heist. But this, as far as heist films go, this one is one of the most entertaining as far as I'm concerned, despite the fact that it didn't have the same production. Like The Anderson Tapes, which is an early 70s film, and it stars like Sean Connery and Christopher Walken, Diane Cannon. It's a Sidney Lumet film. Sidney Lumet's one of my favorite directors of all time. But The Anderson Tapes, which is a heist film, is one of the most boring damn things I've ever watched. And a lot of them are like that. I think if I was to pick, off the top of my head, the only heist film I can really think of that I like more than The Squeeze is Thief. It was 1981 Michael Mann film. It was Michael Mann's first feature. It starred James Caan. That film's phenomenal. Especially when you think about the fact that this was this guy's first film. So I'm not a big heist film fan, and yet The Squeeze surprised me in that vein. So it's one of those things that you really need to see it for yourself. And if you go in with moderate to low expectations, you'll find yourself, kind of like if you give Mitchell a chance, you'll find yourself pleasantly surprised. And as far as ratings go, The Squeeze is one of the few movies that it's so under the radar that it doesn't even have a Rotten Tomatoes score. There's not a critic score, there's not an audience score. There's just none to be had. But on IMDb, it has a somewhat respectable 5.3. A lot of the films I'm watching are that kind of between 3.5 and 5, with my threshold being 6. So 5.3, it's not terrible. So that just goes to show, because this is easily the kind of film that could get a low 4 for some people if they're going to be petty about, the fact that it was a low budget film, the fact that it was following fairly common ground, again, being a heist film. But obviously, it's does a little bit better than what I would expect it to do on IMDb. And if I had to give The Squeeze, I gave Mitchell a 6.8, and I definitely enjoy Mitchell more, but I would give The Squeeze a 6.2. Let's go with a 6.2. And we don't even have a Rotten Tomatoes score to worry about. So these are two films that I'd easily say are above a 6 as far as I'm concerned. They're not fantastic, but I think they're definitely better than they're given credit for, considering the fact that none of them were popular coming out. Especially Mitchell has, had its reputation just beaten down by Mystery Science Theater 3000. In fact, apparently, I don't know if it's substantiated and people think it was a joke anyway, but apparently Joe Don Baker threatened to beat some ass when he heard that Mystery Science Theater 3000 ripped Mitchell apart. But even the creators of the show thought that that was meant as a joke, but, So yeah, even The Squeeze, which is definitely, in my opinion, not as good as Mitchell, has a score that's twice as good on IMDb. But I think they're definitely both worth a watch. If you're into 70s film, if you're into that style, and if the more grittier you like your 70s films, the more you'll enjoy this stuff, because they're as gritty as they come. Especially in terms of production quality. So that is it. That is episode 4 of my series looking into bad films and actually watching a couple that I think are pretty decent, despite what others may think. Again, it's one guy's opinion. Go and figure it out for yourself if you really want to know. I think both these films are worth a watch. That is my review. I give Mitchell a 6.8. I gave The Squeeze a 6.2. That's where I stand for now. And as always, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit my Patreon if you want to help me out that way. Until next time, everybody, this has been Steve the Amateur Historian.